Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's seminar. To make sure you're on the right one, this is about integrated user experience into your IT operations dashboards with HPE apppulse and Operations Bridge. So welcome once again. This webinar is brought to you by HP Enterprises, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, and I'm your host. My name is Jim Copio, and I'm a manager at Whitlock Infrastructure Solutions, and also very involved in Vivid as a Carolinas U.S. chapter leader and a BSM SIG leader. And I've been around in the HP software ecosystem for 17 years, and this is an exciting time. This product set is exceptional for the time that we're in, so strap yourself in. We have 3 speakers, and I'd like to just explain them very quickly. The first one, Eric Odell. And Eric is a senior product marketing manager at HPE, apppulse and user experience solutions. And then we have Darren Posey. He is a product marketing manager for apppulse. And last but not least, Dan Euster. And Dan is a technical marketing manager for the ITOM solutions manager. And ITOM is IT operations manager. That's the portfolio name of which apppulse sits. So a few housekeeping items quickly. This is a live session. It is being recorded, and it'll be available to all Vivid members shortly after the event's over. You'll get a link sent to your inbox, and when you click on that, you'll be able to get to the live recording as well as the Q&A, as well as the slides. So you'll have those at your leisure when the link comes at you, in a couple days, probably less. In terms of questions, this is a chance really to ask lots of questions. That's very important. The panelists have answers pretty much across the board. And when you go to the question pane, just expand that. And then there's a section, a box to type in your question and hit send. And then they'll go in a queue. And then myself as a moderator and some of the panelists will be able to see those. And then we'll start to answer those questions. And hopefully we can get to all of them. It depends on the volume. I think that's it. We really want to move into the meat of this webinar. So I'm going to kind of hand it over to Eric, please, to start his portion. Eric?
Well, thank you, Jim, and welcome everyone to today's webinar about visibility to events impacting the user experience. And this is about integrating user experience into your IT operations dashboard with a combination of Operations Bridge and apppulse. So today's IT environment, it's one of complexity, and applications need to change rapidly to keep up with rising user expectations. There's multitudes of devices, operating systems, and app versions for IT to keep up with. And when something goes wrong, well, the worst way to monitor performance and stability is to wait for users to complain. And by then, they're going to abandon your app. So IT operations requires a central view into their applications and infrastructure to be able to react fast to app performance and stability issues. HPE Operations Bridge brings everything together in a single pane of glass to consolidate events and data from multiple disparate sources. But do the events feeds from your operations dashboard give you a good sense for how your users are experiencing your apps and services? Now, during this webinar, we're going to show you how IT Ops can maintain that single pane of glass for all types of apps. And with the integration of HP apppulse Active, apppulse Mobile, and apppulse Trace with Operations Bridge, you can gain visibility of the user action and correlate it to the line of code, log file, and exception. So let's get started just with the agenda. Where we're going to take you first is just to ask, is the user experience the new SLA? We want to define the user experience and answer that question. Next, my colleague Darren Posey is going to talk with you about the value of Operations Bridge and OMI and how HP apppulse can help the IT team transform from a cost center to a value creator. And finally, my colleague Dan Euster will take you through a few use cases to show you how we deliver synthetic monitoring and real user data into your Operations Bridge. So let's get started. And I want to begin by talking about the user experience that we've found in the news. Recently, Bell Canada was fined $1.25 million for faking their mobile app reviews in the mobile app stores. So apparently, the mobile team at Bell Canada wanted to boost the credibility of their mobile app to get more of their customers to download and adopt the app. So they encouraged the Bell Canada employees to write anonymous raving reviews. Now the article goes on to tell how Bell Canada got caught, but what's more interesting is that Bell Canada understood the power of a 5-star rated app in the App Store. They knew that to affect brand credibility, user adoption, and revenues, the ratings and reviews have to tell a story of exemplary user experience. Now, where Bell Canada missed the point was that achieving a 5-star rating doesn't come through falsifying reviews, because the truth of an application's quality and value will ultimately present itself as users begin experiencing it. So eventually there is no fake review or fake star rating that will boost adoption ratings or lower user churn or increase your revenues. It all is about continuously delivering that excellent user experience. Now, articles like this one in the news are all well and good, but how do we define the user experience? Let's take a look at some of the characteristics that could help us with this definition. Is the user experience about utility? And that would be like, is that app useful to achieve my objectives? Does the app help me get things done easily and efficiently? Is it visually appealing? Is it enjoyable and entertaining? Can I see myself in the app, and do I feel better when using it? Or on a stimulation standpoint, does the app give me inspiration or arouse that wow feeling? Finally, is the mobile app important to me to the point where I can't do without it, and does it make me feel in control? However, in Gartner's report, Delivering User Experience with Agile Development Teams, the analyst Magnus Ravane, he identifies the user experience as that perceived quality when the user does a work task. But does this definition of the user experience go beyond just the function, the aesthetics, and the stimulation of an application? After all, today's users are the most impatient and intolerant users of all time. These users expect to have what they want when they want it. Literally, there's hell to pay for problematic applications. Here at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we recently conducted the App Usage and Abandonment Survey with over 3,000 app users across North America and Europe. It was interesting to discover that 80% of survey participants said they will only give a problematic app 3 tries or less before completely abandoning it. So the survey found that nearly 2/3 of app users expect that their preferred application should load in 4 seconds or less. And almost half of these users expect these applications to refresh screen to screen in 2 seconds or less. And if your app stops responding with errors and crashes, more than half of these users are simply going to delete it from their device and go find an alternative. So suddenly, the user experience has become a very serious business. Now, recently I talked to the quality assurance and automation analyst with one of our customers at Independent Health. And I simply wanted to take on, learn what he does when measuring the user experience. He said that the worst way to monitor performance is to wait for someone to complain. We have to know about slowdowns before anyone has to call in. Now, when you consider the impatience and intolerance of today's application users for performance and stability, Chris's response was quite provocative. Businesses can no longer allow their customers to beat their testers. Today's business has only seconds to provide the experience expected by their customers, and if they neglect to fix that slow-performing, crashing, or battery-hogging application before their users discover it, then what's at risk? So ultimately, it gets down to one thing. The user experience is today's new service level agreement. And if businesses only monitor the back end and the network requests but fail to take into account the user perspective, the user's actions on the client side, they risk their brand and credibility with their users, and ultimately they risk future adoption and revenues. But there are more complications than just the tools that applications have at their disposal. To deliver that exceptional user experience, application teams need to isolate app issues faster and continuously improve app quality and the user experience. But think about this. There are dozens to hundreds of possible user flows for every application. There are over 2,500 mobile device types. There's end-to-end transaction flows and web and server technologies to consider. How do they measure transaction flows from the first click on the app to the network request, to the line of code, to the exception? How do you correlate these user actions to problems with that web server or application server? And who has time to test or monitor for all of these permutations? So as we consider the rising expectations of users and how businesses must tool their systems and processes to deliver high-velocity quality applications, research shows that 70% of the time, businesses are learning about performance and stability problems with their apps from their end users. And a third of the time, the application issues are taking more than a month to resolve. So HPE commissioned a survey just recently called the DevOps APM and the User Experience Survey, and we found that while many DevOps teams understand the importance of prioritizing the user experience, all too often they don't have the tools they need to deliver that superior experience. So more than half of application teams lack an application performance monitoring solution that features these user experience dashboards, and almost 2/3 lack the end-to-end visibility that measures everything from the user action all the way to the server side. And then more than 2/3 are lacking insight down to that line of code or that log transaction that is log file that is causing the error or the slow performance or crash. So let's get down to what the requirements are for monitoring the user experience. As I stated from our customer example earlier, it has become a priority for businesses to find that problem before the users do. There's this expectation with today's digital user that they can access the information that they want when they want it. And they also expect a delightful and easy-to-use user experience as they access this data. Now, it's been estimated that 1 in 4 applications are abandoned after a single use. So while digital businesses are placing tremendous pressure on app teams to deliver that compelling, high-quality app under very short time frames, they're now pressuring IT to monitor the UX to find issues before users do, and ultimately to protect their revenues. Then we move on to the 5-star experience. We've already mentioned that users expect that flawless 5-star experience regardless of what technology or application sits between them and the business. Today's digital business wants to use big data analytics that provides visibility from the user's perspective and helps them focus on the most important issues that are impacting the most users, and then improve the application to achieve that rating that protects their brand and their revenues. And finally, there's visibility from end to end. Most application teams are using traditional APM tools that lack this visibility. We've already covered that in the previous slide. They are measuring back-end problems, but they're not taking into account user actions. So the tools they're using might indicate that everything is within the agreed SLA, but users are still experiencing problems. So what digital businesses require today are monitoring tools with the ability to quickly isolate problems from the user action to the network request, down to the line of code, specific log message, and exception. So before we move on to some of the use cases, I want to talk with you about the apppulse suite, which provides proactive and continuous tracking of relevant metrics related to the user experience. We first solve our customer requirements with HPE apppulse Active, and this is a synthetic monitoring solution that emulates application end users and devices. It detects performance and stability issues for web, mobile, and SaaS apps, and our customers can see and fix issues before users are even aware of them. And we then monitor the user experience with HPE apppulse Mobile, and this is real user monitoring that measures the user experience from the user's perspective, so application teams can understand the business impact. And it provides a single user experience quality score from 0 to 100 that encapsulates the overall experience. And it also follows user actions with the mobile app from screen to screen, showing where users entered and exited the application and everything that happened to them along the way. And finally, we trace the user experience from the front end to the back end with HPE apppulse Trace. And this is transaction analytics that allows DevOps teams to drill down into web and mobile user transactions, isolate the problems, diagnose issues, correlate user actions to the line of code, exception, and log file. So with that, I want to turn the mic over to my colleague Darren Posey, and he's going to talk with you about how to transform IT from being a cost function to becoming that value creator.
Hi everyone, my name is Darren Posey. I'm here to share with you how to do just that. So Today's IT operation teams have a lot on their plates. With timelines shrinking and demands to keep costs down, they're constantly asked to do more with less. I'm sure everyone on the webinar has heard this before. And they have often become reactive ops. With too many tickets and too many tools to keep track of, they have a massive scale issue and a series of technologies to understand and work with. In the act of trying to keep up with this pace of the business, they lack the end-to-end visibility, and they are still asked to be accountable for all the data collectors, the applications, and their infrastructure. It really comes down to like 3 areas that I really want to focus on, one of them being the cost of ownership. There's a cost involved with the number of tools and the complexity and how they integrate with each other. There's the cost of the manual handling of the monitoring when there's an issue because there's no automation. There's a cost of ownership issue when it comes to a limited scale of management environment. So you have all these costs involved. You also have a fragmented visibility. You have no end-to-end view of all the services within your infrastructure. There's a lack of business context when you do have an error, trying to understand where this is coming from and how to resolve it because you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And then there's a proliferation of cloud technologies that are taking place, so they're not all the same. You also have limited automation, so these manual efforts, the ones that require human interaction, well, as much as we'd love to believe it, humans do make mistakes, and so there's a cost involved there as well. And then there's the integration issues. Not all the tools that we're using talk to each other and work with each other and are seamless, so there's an issue there. And then what about the predictive capabilities? Is there a lack of being able to take all these metrics and put it into to complete a full image so you can understand what is happening when an issue does take place? So how can they reduce cloud technology proliferation as well as triage and resolve issues without manual effort, or increase their predictive capabilities? So the answer to this is answering whether or not you can cope will always be tough for your IT team, as long as it's running as a cost function. If you're just trying to complete the task and you're just trying to deliver an environment. Our research shows that IT execs have too many tools. Their staff get involved in too many expensive war rooms where staff spends time debating how issues came to be. IT typically doesn't have an easy way to communicate how it's acting to support the business, and it needs to adopt more automated capabilities to reduce repetitive tasks that can generate human error. Because they aren't using such tools, the impact is often negative, with loss of revenue for the business, unsatisfied customers turning to competitive offerings, and the business investing less in IT, all while the cost of IT operations continue to grow. Gartner confirms that many IT teams do actually admit to having too many tools. This also leads to not being able to see from end to end the entire picture. So again, IT operation leaders are challenged to show how the services they provide tie to business value and move the organization forward. IT can transform to be better, able to deliver strong value by solving issues faster, using, for example, root cause analysis. According to Gartner, IT needs to become a value creator. Many IT execs believe that they can be more efficient by combining the power of real-time event analytics with newer analytics of the millions of log entries. Because of this automated analytics, it is an essential requirement for many, adding to the need to automate corrective measures whenever possible to accelerate mean time to repair and produce a better user experience. They also have indicated that IT seeks the means, such as a dashboard, to communicate on an ongoing basis to the business. Now, this dashboard needs to take into account how rapidly applications are changing. It needs to understand the diversity of the technologies used to deliver today's apps. They need to move at the speed of the next generation deployment platforms and perform an evaluation of the hardware that is being used and note if it's scaling appropriately. But this is not all IT needs to do. Often IT is viewed as the team that's holding back progress because it tends to become a bottleneck. This is because it's tied to so many different aspects of the business and the demands against it. And now, user experience has become an extension of the company's brand and revenues. And as such, IT is now being asked to monitor the user experience in addition. So, how do you do this? Having a single pane of glass to see all events, including the user experience, is the path for IT to become a value creator. With HPE Ops Bridge, you can create automation, assign cases, view runbooks, assign cost to outages, and run your IT operations as a business. This drives value to all the teams it serves. Until recently, IT teams only had insight into hardware, performance, and availability metrics. But now, with apppulse, they can have access to user experience events as well. This way, you can move events from red to green as quickly as possible, with the better user experience as the outcome. So how do you get user experience metrics into this tool? apppulse Active is a great means of getting these into your tool. And to create the monitoring for apppulse Active, we have to look at each module to understand how we get data from these monitors. I'll break it into groups. The first one I'll look at is Active. They use apppulse Active in order to run synthetic scripts against their production environments in order to proactively detect any availability problems or performance degradation early before their end users do. These scripts are created using LoadRunner and can be created for web, mobile, and native applications. Now, we have another module called Mobile. And in mobile applications, these are ones that are uploaded to the Play stores like Google Play and Apple App Stores, and they can be wrapped with our SDK, which will instrument your applications with apppulse Mobile. This will give you access to all of your users and allow you to monitor in real time your app performance and validate that your users are having a good experience. And finally, we have Trace. Trace is used to monitor the application's backend and website user experience. Question?
Hey, Darren, this is Jim. I want to interrupt when you were talking about apppulse Active. As we all probably know, synthetic monitoring, it's been around for a really long time. Just a quick question. Do you see customers shying away from synthetic monitoring in place of real user monitoring or device monitoring?
You know, it's a really great question. You know, I've been working in this space for over 10 years, and synthetic monitoring has gone through some cycles, right? People have seen that, you know, maybe it's kind of a dinosaur product in some ways, and people aren't using it so much because, you know, you have to set it up and then you have to maintain it. But the reality is that this is here to stay. It's been in place for a long time. Most IT organizations have some type of synthetic play already, and they understand the value of that because you can proactively find a problem before your users, because your synthetic scripts never take vacation, they don't take smoke breaks, they don't have to run home to feed the kids. So these tools, you know, really the problem with them isn't the technology. The problem is how can you create them in such a way that they're easy to use and maintain. And I think, you know, we've really done that with our products. You know, with all of these products, we aim to solve a core issue our customers were facing while setting up their monitorings. You know, customers expressed that too much time is taken to set up these monitors. So with apppulse Active, we set out to solve that issue. And we did that for all the other products as well. So with Active, Mobile, and Trace, we made sure that we made it easy to set up and deploy. And in all cases, we expect customers to be able to set up and deploy a monitor within 10 to 20 minutes. And whether it be a simple point-and-click recording with synthetic scripts, or an easy SDK to wrap your apps so you don't have to write it into your code, or a simple to deploy Trace API that allows you to instrument your apps and servers from the servers. The goal was always to get you up and running fast with minimal effort. Does that answer the question?
Actually, it does. Well put. Thank you.
Great. So I'd like to also talk about our architecture, because we talked about a little bit about the type of monitoring tools you can use, but how is this set up? How do you get the metrics into the tool? So apppulse is a standalone APM offering, but it doesn't just stop there. We can pass all the events from apppulse to BSM and Ops Bridge safely and securely. apppulse is used by the engineering teams in order to detect and isolate problems. The statistics about application servers and performance on the servers, devices, and browsers are sent directly to apppulse, where they are processed and stored in apppulse Big Data Vertical DB. So real-time data is used to trigger alerts and events, while stored data is analyzed and reported using apppulse APIs and modern UIs. So once the events are passed over to Operation Bridge, apppulse data is used by the central IT team in order to provide 24/7 NOCs and operation services. apppulse events and metrics are sent to HPE Operation Bridge installed on-premise so that the central team can proactively detect problems and respond at any hour of the day. They can collaborate with the engineering team and understand the impact of the infrastructure problems on the end user experience. So with this, I will now pass the presentation over to my colleague Dan Euster, who will give you a deeper dive into the apppulse offering through a demo session.
Yeah, Darren, real quick, it's Jim again. Just to tie that slide up, when you say instrumenting an app, what exactly do you mean? Can you dive a little bit deeper, or did you really cover it?
No, that's a great question. We use an SDK, so we take your app from the Play Store, we run our SDK against it, and when we do this, we tag all the elements within your application, and then we redeploy that same app with a slightly larger payload to the Play Store, and then the customers can download that new SDK, and then every swipe is transferred over to apppulse Mobile, and we can track and analyze that user experience. So it's a pretty great way to get the information into the tool with no effort really on the side of the development team. So you don't have to create it when you're building your code. You can do it after the fact with our SDK.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Dan. I hope I'm coming through now. So I'm a technical marketing manager in HP Software, and I'm responsible for the APM and the apppulse suite. And I will take you through a couple of use cases. The first one being the integration between apppulse and OMI. So in this particular case, we're going to look actually at a little story, and this will involve Laura, the DBA for IT operations, Tammy from the engineering team, and Jake, the NOC operator. Now, Tammy is the DevOps engineer, and she is one of the few engineers responsible for service delivery. Those are the people responsible for operations and Tier 2 support. And the engineering team works only during business hours. Off business hours, the application is monitored by the NOC team. And in case problems are detected, an on-duty engineer from the engineering team is brought in. Now, one of the applications Jake is monitoring is called TrustMe. And TrustMe is one of the bank's workhorse application, has been working fine for ages with thousands of happy customers. However, last night, Laura, the DBA in the bank's IT operations team, has done some maintenance work. They had some storage concerns. And as part of this task, she tuned the purging policies of some of the tables. And accidentally, Laura has changed also the purging policy of the accounts table, causing some of the accounts to be deleted. So when some of the users log into the environment, the user will get an error since there is no user account record. So we'll follow through the problem, how it's being troubleshooted using HPE Operations Bridge, HPE apppulse Active, and HPE apppulse Trace, working together as an integrated suite of products. So just to set the stage, sometimes during the late evening, Jake, the NOC operator, gets an availability event in the OMI console. This is the Operations Bridge. He asks Tammy, the application support engineer, to look into it. Tammy opens apppulse Active, notices that the Trust Me application is one of the red application in the dashboard, and she drills through the application information screen to identify the login transaction failing from all location. Then further drills into the Trace 360 and finds out that the problem is in the database. Now she can turn the problem over to Laura, the DBA, for final resolution, which is going to be basically a restoration from backup of the affected table. So we'll go now through step by step now that you know what we're trying to solve, and we'll show you how that works. So this is the operations manager screen that Jake is monitoring, and he notices here the apppulse Active reporting and availability problem, and he decides to drill further into the alert to get the details. So he double clicks on it, and he gets now some additional detail about the problem, and he notices that the alert is critical, as you notice here, and it's an open ticket, so it's an open alert, something that needs to be dealt with. So he looks into further, drills further down and looks at the additional information. And here he notices that the alert was triggered by a host called Frankfurt, and that the transaction was running a script called accounts and a transaction called login. And a HTTP status code 500 is generated. That means there is a problem now on the server side. So he scrolls further down into the details, okay, and before he decides to actually pass the transaction over to Tammy, he assigns it actually to the applications group, of which Tammy is a member. So once the transaction is assigned to Tammy, he enters the information, okay. Tammy now has her own screen in Operations Bridge, and she can filter out only the alerts that are applicable to her. So here is now the alert that she needs to deal with. Now, from all, for all practical purposes, Jake's work is done. He has basically completed his work from a NOC perspective, and Tammy is going to take over. So what Tammy will do is she actually logs into the apppulse Active and notices here that the Trust Me application is at about 50% availability. So she clicks on the Trust Me application, enters basically the overview screen of apppulse Active, and there's a whole bunch of information here. We get some availability information, some average response time, timing information. However, we want to get into more detail. We want to understand what happened to the transaction. So she's going to go now to the transaction isolation screen. Okay, and when she drills into the transaction isolation screen, she notices that there are a number of transactions here which are part of the script. Some of them are successful, some have failed. The home page is the primary screen probably that the users get to. No problem there because there is no there are no credentials that need to be provided. However, the login screen has zero availability, and subsequent transactions actually have not even been entered. And obviously, since the user was not able to actually log into the application, there are no other transactions that have actually occurred. But the login transaction has a 0% availability. So she wants to drill further down in it, so she goes back to the overview screen, and on the overview screen she's going to drill now into the transaction failure report. So when we go into the transaction failure report, she sees here a transaction with an HTTP code of 500. She expands the transaction, and she notices that transaction fails from all the locations. At this point, she wants to drill further down and see what happens actually on the back end. And for that, she now drills into the trace server problem. Now, the moment we actually drill into the trace problem, the trace issues. What we have done now is we actually have connected between the application, between the apppulse active and the apppulse trace applications which are working together as part of the suite. Now, she's looking at the trace on the server error. She can see that there were 4 exceptions, okay, all for the HTTP 500 error. And there is some additional timing information as well. However, we're more concerned at the moment with the availability of the transaction more than with the performance. So to understand really what happened here, and you might also notice here some yellow markers here. Those actually show where we actually ran into exceptions. So in order to understand what those exceptions are, she clicks on the exception screen. Notices the 4 exceptions that were mentioned here. Still yet not sufficient information. So the next thing that she's going to do, she's going to correlate between the exception and the log file. So when clicking on the log file, now we get pretty much the problem. Okay, so the problem is starting to stare us in the face. So if we look here, we see that we're trying to get the client's account report. We're querying for the account report. However, an error occurs while getting the client accounts report, and there is no account record for the client in the database. If you remember, this is exactly what we were talking at the beginning when we explained what the problem we're trying to resolve was. And so while the application support engineer, in this case Tammy, may not be able to troubleshoot the database, it's not her field of expertise. However, we fully identify the problem. The problem resides in the database, and now she can pass it on to Laura, the DBA, who can investigate the problem, and since she's the one that made all the changes the night before, she can obviously fix it and restore the records from backup. Now, once the problem gets restored, a couple of hours later, okay, when we get back into the system, we'll notice here now that the system is working correctly. So here is my login transaction, and the login transaction now is at 100% availability. And you'll also notice that the subsequent transactions that follow login are also available and working at 100% availability. A couple of days later also, Laura may also want to understand whether the SLAs of the transactions are in order. And so she clicks on the SLM part of the application, and here she can see that the login transaction and the various other transactions are also performing at 100%. We're looking right now at the weekly time frame, and so although the login and the get user details may work okay at the moment, because of the failure that we've had in the past, we may still have various KPIs that indicate that we may have a major or a critical SLA. So this pretty much concludes this first part of the application, the first use case that shows the complete workflow of how we identify a problem with the application availability, trace it through the apppulse active, understand where the problem has occurred, and then trace it back all the way into the back-end systems to understand what the problem was and how to solve it.
Hey Dan, this is Jim. Excellent. I could have missed this, but can apppulse active tell me where a specific transaction is wasting the most of its time? Is that something we can see?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So apppulse Mobile provides transaction time breakdown for a variety of different metrics. So you can actually find the client time, the download time, the retry time, time to first buffer, things like SSL handshake, connection time, which is basically the TCP/IP handshake, and even the DNS time.
Thank you.
So, sure. So let me move now to the second use case. This is the apppulse mobile integration. And let's try and set up the use case just the same way we did it before. In this case, we are going to look actually into an application crash. We're going to try and detect that. And this will involve actually Lara, who's the Android developer, and again, Jake, who's the NOC operator. So the Advantage mobile banking is one of the most important applications in the company. About 60% of the consumer banking transactions are now performed through mobile devices. And given the dollar value of the transaction passing through it and the brand image it projects, the bank wants to be notified of any problem with it, whether the problem occurs in the back-end system or the consumer device. I mean, let's face it, the consumer will not be able to tell the difference and will not care whether the problem resides in the device or on the back-end system. So the bank has just rolled out a new version of their mobile banking app, and late in the evening the same day they received an alert from the operations bridge. And Jake, who's a NOC operator, receives the alert and goes through a quick triage process, which tells him that there is a related mobile application and a number of users have already experienced problems. So he immediately contacts Lara, who's the on-call developer for this application. She takes over the troubleshooting process and goes into further analysis of the problem. She determines it to be an out-of-memory problem on the mobile device due to the latest update of the application. She opens a ticket in the ticketing system used by the developers, provides all the information from the crash, and lets the change process take over from here. So let's see how that works on a screen-by-screen basis. So again, we're in the operations bridge implemented by Operations Manager I or OMI. And here we see this crash alert problem. So Jake double-clicks on it and enters the details of the application. He noticed that it's actually coming from an Android type application. He goes and does some further drill down into the additional info. He notices here that about 5 out of the 33 users that have used the application have experienced crashes. That's about 15%. He scrolls down and he notices also that the problem occurred on a specific screen, and this check deposit, on a specific action. That's basically when the user taps the scan button. And so with further scroll down, he also gets timing information in case we're actually interested on the solving performance issues. But right now, our most burning problem is the crash. So given that crash, we're going to actually try and drill down into the apppulse mobile, which is monitoring the mobile side of the application. So knowing that this is a mobile application, he calls Lara, and Lara is the one that's going to take over from here. So Lara is going to now click on the apppulse mobile callback URL, and she launches into the apppulse mobile application. And here she is going to click on the Advantage mobile banking. This is the main banking application that we're looking at. Get into the overview screen where she gets a whole bunch of information about the application. This includes also the Fundix, which Eric mentioned a little bit earlier. So the Fundix is basically an index combining various KPIs that reflect the perceived user experience. So a perfect Fundix would be 100, but we're now down to about 75, which is not particularly good. And points are lost for performance, stability, and resource usage. We notice also that in this case, most of the points are used due to loss of stability. And that's really where the application crashes are reflected. So at this point, Lara drills down into the stability issues. Okay, and here she sees that there are a number of stability problems. Because some time has passed, the number of crashes may have increased. And she knows this as also the number of crashes of affected users over the last 24 hours. So here is the distribution of the affected users. In the crash section, she also notices that most of the crashes occur on this check deposit application, which is what we noticed before, and specifically on the scan button. And so she goes and drills down into this particular crash, and here's the answer. The answer stares right at her. It's a Java out-of-memory error. So when the scan button on the mobile device is tapped, it invokes a camera function. However, the camera has insufficient memory allocated to it, and the application crashes at that point. So on the bottom of the screen here, you'll notice that there are a number of other incidents of this crash. So if Lara wanted, she could go actually through all the 20 incidences or so. However, she's more interested in seeing what is the path that the user took through the application. So she clicks on the crash trail, and here she can see exactly what is the sequence of events that caused the crash. Okay, so the user went through select the money transfer, tapped on the transfer button, connected to a specific gateway, selected the transfer function, tapped the menu button, everything still works fine. Select the money transfer, that actually invokes the camera, and now at this point the camera is having a low memory issues. The moment she taps on the scan button, the crash occurs. At this point, what Laura wants to do is make sure that she can submit a defect. So the system is already integrated with the ticketing system that the development team uses. In this case, it's Jira. And as the ticket is popped up, a whole bunch of information is already pre-populated, okay, including things like the crash trail, the application version, the OS device, and so on. At this point in time, Laura has pretty much gotten as far as she can take it, and this is at the point in time where the change management process that the DevOps team has put in place should take over. Okay, so the ticket has been opened. The DevOps team should actually solve this problem eventually, and Laura can now go to the application and just mark this application now as, this event as resolved. Okay, and this pretty much concludes her part in the process. And what I'm hoping you were able to notice from the process that we went through is how appppulse Mobile together with HPE Operations Bridge can work together to implement a mobile application monitoring, troubleshooting, and resolution process. So with that, I'm going to pass control over back to Eric, I think. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it's Jim.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I think it's important with 10 minutes left to try to field some of these questions. We have actually quite a few, and I want to make sure the attendees get what they need. So thanks to the three presenters. Great Dan Let me just start with the first question. I'm looking in my pane here. This would be directed to any, well, Dan or Darren. What type of data does the Operations Bridge handle?
So the Operations Bridge handles two types of data. It actually captures events and it captures topology. So by topology, we mean sort of the connections between the applications and the underlying infrastructure. So there is a model that can be built based on that topology so that when monitoring information starts flowing in, we can actually understand what part of the application or the infrastructure has been affected. However, Operations Bridge itself captures none of the metrics. Metrics are captured in a different application that's called Business Service Management, or BSM.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Tim McGee, I believe, having to do with how can I view all the questions from all the attendees. So Tim, only the organizers can see the questions from the attendees during this webinar, but a written Q&A will be available on the Vivid website in about 5 days. So when you get your link and you get into the recording and slides, you'll also see the Q&A for all the questions. So you just have to wait 5 days, maybe sooner. So thanks for that question, Tim. Let's see, we have one from Leah Gurov. The question is, I am wondering whether we are going to get the presentation at the end of the webinar. Very common question. So yes, the same answer applies. You'll get the link and you can jump in and see that. Okay, a bunch of other good ones here. Rohan has a question. So does that mean that that till the time users does not update the app, apppulse Mobile won't be monitoring it or won't be getting metrics from that user device? Dan or Darren?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So once you instrument your application with the SDK, you usually put it into the Play Store, and some customers have their application set to automatically download, new versions. Some people have a notification that says there's a new version of your app available. Do you want to download it? And some people have turned that feature off completely, and they're blind to it until they go to download a new version. So until the customer physically downloads the instrumented app, it will not be reporting. But as you continue to use the product over time, you would still have the benefit of people using the older version of your application that's been instrumented until they upgrade to the newest version. One of the beauties of apppulse Mobile is that it actually can give you version control information. So you can see if a customer is having an error, and you can know what version of your application they're using, which plays a factor, right? Because when they go into the Play Store and complain, you don't always know what version of the application they're using, what OS they're on, what phone they're on, what part of the world they're coming from. You don't have those metrics. You just know that Jill's upset and it's Sunday night. I mean, that's really all you kind of know. So with the tool, we try to give you all those metrics so you can know, where Jill's coming from, what version of your operating system they're using, what version of your app they're using, what phone they're on, all that information to make the ability for you to reproduce the issue, fix the issue, and create a better user experience for everybody involved.
Awesome. Hey, there's another question from Jacopo, if I said that correctly. The question is, what is the technology behind apppulse Active? And he's thinking it might be ViewGen. Is that correct?
Hey, my favorite question. Actually, it is LoadRunner, or ViewGen is another way of using LoadRunner for like a single session or running them from POPs. People often use it as the word LoadRunner, ViewGen, or Virtual User Generator. LoadRunner has been in the marketplace for, oh gosh, I don't even know, at least 12 plus years. And this tool is, I consider it the best in class. And I say that because of the technology involved, meaning we're continually advancing this product, continually adding new protocols to it. The relationships that we have with some of the vendors like Citrix and SAP to make sure that we're a part of their roadmap when they're developing apps gives us an edge over a lot of the competition. And so I'm actually quite proud of this product and how well it records most applications in the market, whether they're a mobile application over web, a mobile application using an APK file. If they're a Citrix application or SAP or web services, really in this space there really isn't much that can do it out of the box as well as LoadRunner can. So yeah, and another beauty of this tool is that you can use multiple protocols as well, so you can mix and mingle different protocols to get the desired monitor that you really want. And at the end of the day, the ops team doesn't want to sit around and fiddle with synthetic monitors. They want to be able to create them quickly, fix them when they're broken, and get them back up or running as quickly as possible so you can move from red to green as quickly as you can. But yes, the answer is yes. It runs on ViewGen.
Well, I see we have like 3 minutes, so let me, you're going to have to go to the link in about 5 days or less to get a lot of this. Forgive me, I know you guys have great questions, but I do have one from Asfar, and he did have a question about apppulse trace, and the question is that a probe-based product?
Yeah, so this is Dan. Yes, the answer to the question is indeed it is a probe-based product. The probe, or as you want to call it, the agent, has to be downloaded, and it would instrument the backend application. The instrumentation also will put some markers into the header of the HTTP request that goes to the browser, the user's machine. And so between the marker and the information that's now received from the probe on the backend user, we can correlate those two things together. And so that's how we understand how the request that's coming actually on the browser end is correlated now with the response that will come from the server.
Okay, thank you. Anand has a great question here. Can apppulse suite be integrated with HPE OM, or it must be Ops Bridge only?
So at this point in time, the integration is with OMI only. And it is with OMI because it's actually making use of some of the features of OMI. And OMI is basically, or OMI is the product that's moving us forward into the, let's call it the 21st century. It has a whole bunch of features such as application modeling, which are not available in OM, and that's one of the reasons we're integrating mainly with it.
That makes sense. Thank you. Martin has a question. How are events generated via apppulse? Is it like email, API, SNMP?
So we have, for the apppulse active piece of it, we are connected directly into the database. So when the event takes place, there's a direct connection between the apppulse server and your Ops Bridge, so we can safely and securely pass that over. We do have to send that over reverse channel proxy, and we often have to set up certificates on both sides of the equation. But once the connection is established, and we do all this for free, it's part of the offering. Once that connection is established, we can offer you three nines as of availability for when the event takes place and how that's transferred over to your Ops Bridge on your side.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if we can sneak in 2 more, and then we'll do wrap up. In no particular order, Daryl has a question. Can this handle a combination of on-premise systems and SaaS that compromise some of our systems?
So it's a very good question. The issue is, what exactly is this? Okay, so we talked about a total of 3 different components. We talked about apppulse Active, apppulse Mobile, and apppulse Trace. So apppulse Active can actually handle any application wherever it is, because all we're doing is we're mimicking we're simulating what the user would do. So whether that application is on-prem or in the cloud or SaaS hosted, we don't care. We probably wouldn't even be aware of what that application is from that synthetic use perspective. From the mobile perspective, obviously the application that resides in the mobile device. So we're monitoring a mobile device application. For Trace, right now, the answer is we're managing mainly on-prem application. So if your application is on-prem, we instrument that application, and then we bring that information into apppulse Trace that resides in SaaS. Okay, so it comes from your application into our cloud, where we do the analysis and the reporting. Okay, and so it's kind of a combination of different things. So I could say, yes, we handle both SaaS as well as cloud as well as on-prem, but with understanding where each one of the three components actually fits.
Okay, thank you. Hey, last question. I know we're at the top of the hour. This is from Christopher Hurst, and the question, what kind of overhead does the probe add to the application?
Very good question. So in general, we monitor and we've developed our probes to have what we call minimal impact. Of course, they do have some, but usually it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1 to 5%, and it provide that as a range mainly because it depends really what you're trying to monitor, what you're trying to instrument, and based on that, it may have more or less. But 1 to 5% is really not a very significant amount of overhead, given what you get out of trace.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to wrap up right now because we want to respect everyone's time. And I certainly learned a lot, and I learned that user experience is not passé. It's rocking and rolling. I'd like to make a quick mention. I'm not going to read the slide, but Discover Conference, which is the annual, well, twice a year actually, but in the U.S. it's in Vegas on June 7 through 9, and there is an opportunity to get an early bird special via Vivid of $300 off by the end of March, I believe, so this month. So there's a link on the bottom, if you will. But it's a great event, and you're going to hear quite a bit about apppulse at the event through different sessions and, of course, the exhibitor booths. And the last slide, please. Just wanted to ask a favor. We're always looking for feedback, and there is a short survey question. It will take you no time at all. If you could just kindly click on the link and give us your feedback and questions. So we're going to conclude. Panelists, thank you so much. Again, not to be repetitive, the slides and the Q&A and all the information from today's webinar will be sent to you via a link this week, and you can jump back on it, and if you have questions, there's contact information as well. So I'm going to do wrap up, and thank you everyone again, and have a great Tuesday afternoon, and good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.